My daughter said I was too old, too frail, and too out of touch to make important decisions anymore. So she started making choices about my life without consulting me, claiming I wasn't capable of understanding complex matters. But I wasn't incapable. I wasn't helpless. While she thought she could control every aspect of my existence, I was quietly making decisions that would change her life in ways she never saw coming. I raised Amanda as a single mother after her father abandoned us when she was 8 years old. 32 years of sacrificing everything so she could have the best education, the finest opportunities, and the confidence to build whatever life she dreamed of having. I worked 2 jobs throughout her childhood, saved every penny I could for her college fund, and made sure she never felt the sting of being different from her classmates whose fathers were still around. Amanda became exactly what I'd hoped she would, a successful investment banker with a beautiful home, expensive car, and impressive salary. She married Richard, another finance professional, and they built the kind of lifestyle I'd only dreamed about when I was scrubbing floors to pay her tuition. When they had my grandson Tyler, I was overjoyed to finally be a grandmother, to have someone small and innocent to spoil after years of working so hard. But Amanda's success came with an arrogance I hadn't anticipated. She began treating me like I was naive about financial matters, despite the fact that I'd managed to save enough money working minimum wage jobs to pay for her entire college education without loans. She talked down to me about investments, retirement planning, and modern financial strategies, as if I'd never balanced a checkbook or made a budget in my life. When I turned 75, Amanda started making comments about my decision-making abilities that went beyond normal concern for an aging parent. "Mom, these financial decisions are complicated," she'd say when I mentioned wanting to review my portfolio. "You don't understand how markets work anymore," she'd insist when I questioned her advice about my retirement accounts. "Let me handle the grown-up stuff," became her standard response to any conversation about my affairs. I thought it was just Amanda being overly protective until I realized she'd been making actual decisions about my life without telling me. Important decisions that she had no right to make without my consent. The first betrayal I discovered was about my house. I'd lived in the same home for 40 years, raised Amanda there, and planned to stay until I died. But when I mentioned to my neighbor that I was thinking about updating the kitchen, she looked confused and said, "Amanda told us you were planning to sell soon and move into senior housing." I confronted Amanda immediately. "Why are you telling people I'm selling my house?" She didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. "Mom, we need to start thinking practically about your future. This house is too big for you and the maintenance is becoming overwhelming. I've been looking at some nice senior communities that would be much more appropriate for your situation." But I hadn't asked her to plan anything. She was making decisions about where I would live based on her assumptions about what I could handle, not on any actual problems I was having. The second betrayal was about my finances. I'd always managed my own money carefully, and at 75 I still balanced my checkbooks, paid my bills on time, and made thoughtful decisions about my investments. But Amanda had apparently been talking to my financial advisor about my accounts without my knowledge. When I called my advisor to discuss moving some money from stocks to bonds, he said, "Your daughter and I have already discussed your portfolio allocation. We agreed that you should take a more conservative approach and let family members handle the more complex decisions." "When did you discuss my finances with Amanda?" I asked, feeling my blood pressure rise. "She called a few weeks ago with some concerns about your ability to manage the more sophisticated aspects of your investments. She suggested that maybe she should have power of attorney to help with financial decisions." Power of attorney. Amanda was trying to gain legal control over my money without even discussing it with me first. The third betrayal was about my medical care. When I went for my regular checkup, Dr. Peterson started asking me questions that seemed oddly specific. "Your daughter mentioned you've been having some memory issues," he said. "She's concerned about your ability to manage your medications independently." "I don't have memory issues and I manage my medications just fine." "What exactly did Amanda tell you?" I demanded. She called to discuss her concerns about your cognitive function and suggested we might need to consider some additional support services for you. Amanda had been calling my doctor and planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity, trying to create a medical record that would support her claims that I needed help managing my affairs. The fourth betrayal was about Tyler. I'd always been close with my grandson, babysitting him regularly and maintaining a strong relationship despite Amanda's busy schedule. But suddenly, those visits became less frequent, and when I asked Amanda about bringing Tyler over for our usual Sunday dinners, she said, "Mom, I think it's better if we limit Tyler's visits. I'm concerned about your ability to supervise him safely." "What are you talking about? I've been caring for children longer than you've been alive, and Tyler and I have never had any safety issues. You're older now, Mom. Your reflexes aren't as quick, and I worry about what might happen if there was an emergency." She was taking away my relationship with my grandson based on imaginary concerns about my caregiving abilities. The final betrayal was the most shocking. I received a call from a real estate agent asking if I wanted to schedule a home evaluation for my upcoming sale. When I told her I wasn't selling my house, she seemed confused and said, "Your daughter Amanda contacted our office and said you were planning to list the property within the next few months. She wanted to get a market assessment to help with your decision-making." Amanda hadn't just been talking about me selling my house. She'd actually contacted real estate agents and started the process without my knowledge or consent. The breaking point came when I received legal documents in the mail that I didn't understand. They looked official and complicated, with my name and Amanda's name listed as parties, but the legal language was dense and confusing. I called Amanda to ask what they were about. "Mom, those are just some financial planning documents. Richard helped me prepare them to protect your assets and make sure everything is handled properly as you get older." "What kind of financial planning documents?" "I didn't ask for any financial planning. They're power of attorney forms and some trust arrangements. Nothing for you to worry about, just paperwork to make sure I can help you when you need it." I took the documents to my neighbor Eleanor, who used to work as a paralegal, and asked her to explain them in plain English. Her face went pale as she read through the papers. "Dorothy," she said, "these documents would give Amanda complete control over your finances, your medical decisions, and even where you live. If you signed these, she could sell your house, move your money, and make medical decisions for you without asking your permission." But she said they were just for financial planning. "These aren't planning documents. These are control documents. She's asking you to sign away your right to make your own decisions." I was stunned. Amanda wasn't just making suggestions about my future. She was trying to legally take control of my life. She'd been systematically undermining my independence, questioning my capabilities, and building a case that I needed her to manage my affairs. That evening, I called Amanda and told her I wouldn't be signing the documents. "Mom, you don't understand what you're rejecting. These forms are for your own protection." "Protection from what? I'm managing my own life perfectly well." "Mom, you're 75 years old. You can't keep pretending you can handle complex decisions independently. I'm trying to help you before you make mistakes that could hurt you financially or put you in danger." "Amanda, I've been making my own decisions for 75 years. I don't need you to take over my life." "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't have the judgment to recognize when you need help. That's why I have to make these decisions for you." The conversation ended with Amanda hanging up on me, frustrated that I wouldn't cooperate with her plan to control my life. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She thought I was too old and frail to fight back, but she'd forgotten that I'd spent decades learning how to be resourceful, determined, and strategic when I needed to protect myself and my family. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list of everything Amanda had been trying to control. My house, my money, my medical care, my relationship with Tyler, and ultimately my entire future. She thought I was incapable of making complex decisions, but she was about to learn that I was capable of making decisions she'd never see coming. I started by calling my own attorney, someone Amanda had never met, and explaining the situation. My lawyer, Patricia Walsh, was disturbed by what Amanda had been attempting. "Mrs. Chen," she said, "what your daughter is trying to do is gain guardianship over you without going through proper legal channels. She's undermining your independence and trying to manipulate you into signing away your rights." Patricia helped me understand that I had more power than Amanda realized. I owned my house outright, controlled significant retirement savings and investments, and had the legal right to make decisions about my own future. Most importantly, I had the right to determine what would happen to my assets when I died. I spent the next week reviewing all my financial accounts, legal documents, and estate planning materials. What I discovered was that Amanda's lifestyle was much more dependent on my eventual inheritance than I'd realized. She and Richard had bought their expensive house assuming they'd inherit my property. They'd made financial commitments based on expectations about my estate. But expectations aren't guarantees, and I was about to teach Amanda the difference. I scheduled meetings with my financial advisor, my estate attorney, and my accountant. I explained what Amanda had been doing and asked them to help me restructure my affairs in a way that would protect my independence while sending a clear message about who was actually in control of my life. First, I changed all my account passwords and removed Amanda's name from any documents where I'd previously listed her as an emergency contact. I wanted to make sure she couldn't access my financial information or make inquiries about my accounts without my explicit permission. Second, I updated my will and estate planning documents. If Amanda thought I was too incapable to make my own decisions while I was alive, then she clearly wasn't qualified to inherit the responsibility for managing my assets after I died. Third, I set up legal protections to ensure that no one could force me into signing documents or making decisions under pressure. I established clear documentation of my mental competency and created legal barriers to anyone attempting to gain power of attorney without my informed consent. But most importantly, I began making strategic decisions about my assets that would demonstrate exactly how capable I really was. The first phase of my plan involved demonstrating that I was not only capable of making complex decisions but that I was better at financial planning than Amanda had ever given me credit for. I contacted several investment firms and requested meetings to discuss portfolio diversification strategies. I researched market trends, studied financial publications, and prepared detailed questions about retirement planning options. When I met with the investment advisors, I presented a comprehensive analysis of my current holdings and outlined specific goals for asset allocation over the next decade. The advisors were impressed with my knowledge and preparation. One even commented that I had a better understanding of risk management than many of his younger clients. I documented all these meetings and kept copies of my investment research to create a paper trail showing my continued mental acuity and financial competence. If Amanda ever tried to claim I was incapable of making complex decisions, I'd have professional testimony to the contrary. The second phase involved taking control of decisions that Amanda had been trying to make for me. I contacted the real estate agent she'd spoken to and clarified that my house was not for sale and that Amanda had no authority to discuss my property. I sent a formal letter to my doctor's office stating that Amanda was not authorized to discuss my medical care and that all communications about my health should go directly to me. I also called Tyler directly and arranged for him to spend weekends at my house, making it clear to Amanda that I was perfectly capable of caring for my grandson and that our relationship didn't require her supervision. The third phase was the most satisfying. I began making financial decisions that would benefit people and causes I cared about, decisions that would reduce the inheritance Amanda was expecting. I researched charitable organizations that aligned with my values and made substantial donations to causes that mattered to me. I donated money to the literacy program at the local library, funded scholarships for single mothers attending community college, and contributed to a senior center that provided services for elderly people who actually needed help managing their affairs. Each donation was tax-deductible and represented money that wouldn't be available for Amanda's inheritance. I also decided to start enjoying my own money while I was alive instead of saving everything for people who thought I was too incompetent to spend it wisely. I booked a cruise to Alaska, something I'd always wanted to do but had never felt I could afford. I hired a housekeeper to help with cleaning so I could spend more time on activities I enjoyed. I bought a new car to replace my 15-year-old sedan. Every purchase and every donation was carefully documented and legally sound. I was proving that I was not only capable of making complex financial decisions but that I was making smart, thoughtful choices about how to use my resources. The fourth phase involved setting traps to see how Amanda would react when she discovered that I wasn't following her advice and wasn't acting like the helpless elderly person she thought I was. I started mentioning my activities casually during our phone conversations, watching to see how she'd respond to evidence that I was making independent decisions. When I told her about my cruise reservation, she was shocked. "Mom, you can't travel alone at your age. What if something happens to you?" "Amanda, I'm going on a supervised tour with medical facilities available on the ship. It's actually safer than many activities I do at home." "But what about the expense? You need to be more careful with your money." "I can afford this cruise easily, and I've decided I want to enjoy my savings instead of just leaving them sitting in accounts." I could hear the panic in her voice as she realized that I was spending money she'd been counting on inheriting. The fifth phase was revealing to Amanda that I'd been documenting her attempts to control my life and that I'd taken legal steps to protect myself. I invited her to lunch and presented her with copies of all the legal documents I'd signed to ensure my independence. "Amanda," I said, "I've updated my estate planning and financial arrangements to reflect my desire to maintain control over my own life and my own decisions." She looked through the paperwork, her face growing paler as she realized what I'd done. "Mom, what is this?" "These are the complex decisions you thought I was too incapable to make. I've restructured my accounts, updated my will, and established legal protections to ensure that no one can force me to give up control of my affairs." "You can't be serious. You're making emotional decisions that could hurt your financial security." "No, Amanda. I'm making informed decisions based on careful research and professional advice. The difference is that these are my decisions, not yours." Amanda's reaction to discovering I'd taken complete control of my own affairs was swift and revealing. Within days of our lunch meeting, she began making frantic phone calls to my financial advisor, my attorney, and even my doctor, trying to convince them that I was making irrational decisions and needed intervention. But her desperate attempts to undermine me only served to highlight how wrong she'd been about my capabilities all along. My financial advisor, who had witnessed my thorough preparation and thoughtful analysis during our recent meetings, told Amanda in no uncertain terms that I was one of his most financially savvy clients. "Your mother has an excellent understanding of her portfolio and has made very sound decisions about her asset allocation," he said. "I see no evidence of impaired judgment or financial incompetence. In fact, her recent investment strategy changes have already saved her money in the current market downturn." My attorney, Patricia Walsh, was even more direct when Amanda called her office demanding to know what nonsense I'd been filling my head with. "Miss Chin, your mother came to me with well-researched concerns about her independence being undermined. She demonstrated clear thinking, careful planning, and appropriate caution about protecting her legal rights. The documents she signed are exactly what I would recommend for someone in her situation who wants to maintain control over their affairs." My doctor was perhaps the most damning witness against Amanda's claims. Your mother is mentally sharp, physically capable, and shows no signs of cognitive decline, he told Amanda when she called to express concerns about my recent decisions. Her recent choices to travel, engage in new activities, and manage her own health care are actually positive indicators of continued independence and good judgment. I'm not sure why you're concerned about her decision-making capacity. Amanda found herself in the humiliating position of having every professional in my life tell her that her mother was not only competent but more capable than she'd claimed. But that was just the beginning of the consequences she would face for trying to control my life. The real shock came when Amanda received a call from my estate attorney asking her to come in for a meeting about my updated will. She arrived at Patricia's office expecting to discuss the inheritance she'd been counting on, but instead found herself facing a document that reflected my true feelings about her attempts to control my life. Mrs. Peterson, Patricia said, using Amanda's married name with deliberate formality, your mother has made some significant changes to her estate planning that I need to explain to you. Amanda sat down confidently, assuming that any changes would be minor adjustments that wouldn't affect her substantial inheritance. She'd spent years expecting to inherit my house, my investments, and my savings, assets worth nearly $400,000 that she'd been factoring into her own financial planning. Patricia opened the file and began reading from my new will. Dorothy Chin, being of sound mind and clear judgment, hereby revokes all previous wills and establishes the following distribution of assets upon my death. The first shock was that Amanda's inheritance had been reduced from the bulk of my estate to a modest $25,000. The rest of my assets were being distributed to charitable organizations, educational scholarships, and Tyler's College Fund, which would be managed by a trust that Amanda couldn't access or control. There must be a mistake, Amanda said, her voice shaking. My mother wouldn't make these kinds of changes without discussing them with me. Actually, Patricia replied calmly, your mother was very clear about her reasoning. She feels that someone who considers her too incompetent to make her own decisions while she's alive shouldn't be trusted to inherit the responsibility for managing her assets after she's gone. Amanda's face went white as the implications sank in. This is because I tried to help her with financial planning? She's punishing me for caring about her future. According to your mother's documentation, you weren't helping with planning. You were attempting to gain control over her finances without her consent. You told her financial advisor she was incompetent to manage investments. You contacted real estate agents about selling her house without her knowledge. You prepared legal documents to give yourself power of attorney without her request. I was protecting her from making mistakes. Patricia pulled out a thick folder that made Amanda's eyes widen with alarm. Your mother has been documenting your attempts to control her life for months. She has recordings of conversations where you dismissed her capabilities, letters proving you contacted her doctor with false concerns about her mental state, and evidence that you were planning to force her into senior housing against her wishes. Amanda stared at the folder in horror. She was recording me? She was protecting herself from someone who was systematically undermining her independence. The evidence shows a clear pattern of you attempting to gain control over her life by convincing others she was incompetent, when in fact all the professional assessments show she's exceptionally capable for her age. But the will was only part of the story. I had also made substantial changes to my living arrangements and financial management that would affect Amanda's life immediately, not just after my death. The financial impact on Amanda's family was devastating and immediate. They had been living beyond their means, expecting to inherit assets that would cover their debts and provide financial security. Their expensive house was mortgaged based partly on the assumption they'd eventually inherit my property. Their lifestyle was funded by credit cards and loans they'd planned to pay off with my inheritance. Without that inheritance, they faced financial ruin. Richard was furious when he learned about the changes to my will. He had been the one who helped Amanda prepare the power of attorney documents, assuming they were securing their family's financial future. "You told me your mother was declining and would need us to manage her affairs," he said to Amanda during one of their increasingly frequent arguments. "Now she's giving away our inheritance to charities?" "She's not thinking clearly," Amanda insisted. "She's making emotional decisions because she's angry with me. Or she's making informed decisions because she's more capable than you gave her credit for," Richard shot back. "Either way, we're not getting the money we were counting on, and we're in serious financial trouble." Richard had signed personally on several loans based on their expected inheritance, including a second mortgage on their house and a business investment that was already failing. Without my assets to back up their debt, they were facing bankruptcy. The social consequences were equally devastating. Amanda had been telling colleagues, neighbors, and friends about her elderly mother who needed help managing her affairs. She'd positioned herself as the responsible daughter dealing with a parent's declining capabilities, garnering sympathy and support from people who admired her dedication to family care. But when those same people learned about my travels, my charitable donations, my estate planning changes, and my continued independence, they realized that Amanda had been either lying or dramatically wrong about my condition. The neighbors she'd told about my need to sell my house saw me hosting garden parties and organizing community events. The colleagues she'd complained to about my financial confusion learned that I was making sophisticated investment decisions. Amanda found herself having to explain why she'd been so wrong about her mother's capabilities, and no explanation made her look good. Either she'd been lying about my condition to gain sympathy, or she'd been genuinely unable to assess her own mother's mental state accurately. Both possibilities damaged her credibility and professional reputation. Even her colleagues at the investment bank began questioning her judgment. If Amanda couldn't accurately assess her own mother's financial competence, how could clients trust her to assess their investment needs? Several clients requested to be transferred to different advisors after learning about the situation. The most devastating consequence was Tyler's reaction when he learned the truth about what his mother had been doing. At 16, he was old enough to understand the implications of Amanda's attempts to control my life and smart enough to see through her justifications. "Mom, you told me Grandma was getting confused and couldn't take care of herself," Tyler said during one of our weekend visits. "But she just explained her entire investment strategy to me, and it's more sophisticated than anything they teach in my economics class. I was trying to protect her from making mistakes that could hurt her," Amanda said weakly. "It sounds like you were trying to control her life so you could inherit her money," Tyler replied bluntly. "And now she doesn't trust you anymore because you lied about her being incompetent." Tyler began spending more time with me and less time listening to his mother's complaints about my decisions. He could see for himself that I was mentally sharp, physically capable, and making thoughtful choices about my life and my resources. The breakdown of Amanda's marriage was swift and final. Richard had never fully supported her attempts to control my life, but he'd gone along with them because he believed they were necessary for our family's financial security. When he learned that Amanda had been wrong about my incompetence and that their expected inheritance was gone, he felt betrayed and manipulated. "You convinced me that your mother needed our help," Richard said during their final argument. "You made me complicit in trying to take away her independence based on lies about her mental state. Now we're financially ruined, and I've lost all respect for the woman I thought you were." Richard filed for divorce 6 months later, citing irreconcilable differences but specifically mentioning Amanda's deceptive behavior regarding family financial planning in his petition. During the divorce proceedings, it became clear that their entire lifestyle had been built on assumptions about my inheritance that were never guaranteed. The divorce settlement left Amanda with half of their debt but none of their assets, since everything had been leveraged against the inheritance she was no longer receiving. She was forced to declare personal bankruptcy and move into a small studio apartment, working longer hours at a job where her reputation had been damaged by her misjudgment of my capabilities. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence was watching Amanda realize that she'd created the exact situation she'd claimed to be preventing. She'd said I needed protection from making poor decisions, but her attempts to control me had actually prompted me to make decisions that were far more complex and consequential than anything I'd been planning before. She'd claimed I was too old to manage my finances, but her interference had motivated me to restructure my entire estate in sophisticated ways that protected my assets and served my values. She'd said I was too frail to live independently, but her pressure had inspired me to make my living situation more secure and permanent than it had ever been. Most ironically, she'd insisted I was too out of touch to understand modern financial strategies, but her attempts to take control had prompted me to work with investment advisors and estate attorneys who helped me create a financial plan that was more advanced and protective than anything Amanda could have developed. By Christmas that year, the full scope of the changes had become clear. Amanda was living in a studio apartment, struggling financially, and had limited contact with Tyler, who preferred spending time with his financially stable and mentally sharp grandmother. Richard had remarried and moved across the country, leaving Amanda to deal with the consequences of her choices alone. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I'd returned from my Alaska cruise with plans for trips to Ireland and Italy. My renovated kitchen was the centerpiece of monthly dinner parties where I entertained friends and neighbors who respected my independence and valued my company. My charitable donations were funding scholarships and community programs that made a real difference in people's lives. When Amanda read the newspaper article about my community involvement, she called me in tears. "Mom, I never meant for things to turn out this way. I thought I was protecting you." "Amanda," I said calmly, "you weren't protecting me. You were trying to control me because you thought I was too incompetent to make my own decisions. The irony is that your attempts to take away my autonomy motivated me to make decisions that were more sophisticated and far-reaching than anything I'd planned before. Can we fix this? Can we go back to the way things were before?" "We can't go back," I replied, "but we can go forward differently. If you want to be part of my life, you need to respect that it's my life to live. You need to accept that I'm capable of making my own decisions, and you need to stop trying to manage my future for your own benefit. And if I do that, will you change the will back?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it through the phone. "Amanda, the will reflects my true feelings about someone who tried to take away my independence for financial gain. Those feelings don't change just because you got caught. The decisions I made about my estate are permanent, just like the decisions you made when you tried to control my life." Amanda hung up without saying goodbye, and I sat in my beautiful, independently owned home, surrounded by evidence of the complex decisions she'd claimed I couldn't make. By trying to prove I was incapable of managing my own life, Amanda had prompted me to take more complete control of my future than I'd ever exercised before. She'd wanted to make decisions for me, and instead I'd made decisions that changed both our lives forever. 5 years later, I'm sitting in my beautifully renovated kitchen, planning my next trip to New Zealand, while Tyler helps me research sustainable investment options. I'm 80 years old now, still living independently, still making my own decisions, and still surprising people who assume age means incompetence. Amanda and I have a cordial but distant relationship. She visits occasionally, usually when she needs something, and she's learned not to question my decisions. Richard left her 2 years ago, tired of the financial stress from losing their expected inheritance. She lives in a small apartment now and works longer hours to make ends meet. Tyler graduated college debt-free thanks to the fund I established. He's working as a financial advisor now, inspired by watching me manage my affairs successfully despite his mother's attempts to undermine my autonomy. He visits every weekend and brings his girlfriend to Sunday dinner. The house Amanda thought I was too frail to maintain is thriving. I've turned the backyard into a garden that supplies the local food bank, and I host monthly dinners for other widows. My art collection, which I'm donating piece by piece, has become a source of community cultural enrichment. The charities benefiting from my donations send regular updates about scholarships and programs I've supported. Single mothers are graduating college, elderly people are receiving transportation services, and literacy programs are expanding, all because I chose to use my money for causes I believed in. Sometimes people ask if I regret being harsh with Amanda. But I don't regret protecting my independence from someone actively trying to take it away. I spent too many years sacrificing for others to let anyone control my final decades. The experience taught me that family loyalty shouldn't require surrendering self-determination. Sometimes the most loving thing is refusing to enable someone's need to control you. Amanda learned that treating someone like they're incapable might inspire them to demonstrate capabilities you never knew they had. She thought my age made me vulnerable, but discovered that experience and wisdom are powerful tools for fighting back. Most importantly, I learned it's never too late to take complete control of your own life, even if it disappoints people with other plans for your future. I spent my final productive years doing exactly what I wanted, helping causes I cared about, and building relationships based on respect rather than assumptions. Amanda wanted to make decisions for me because she thought I wasn't capable. Instead, she inspired me to make decisions that changed both our lives forever. The difference is that my decisions were based on careful thought, professional advice, and clear goals, while hers were based on assumptions, entitlement, and the mistaken belief that being my daughter gave her the right to control my destiny. Now I make every decision for myself, and I sleep peacefully knowing that my life is exactly what I've chosen it to be.